Well, I'd like to introduce our guests today. We have Michelle Zimmeran and Fabian, and both of them are founders of Pidola, which is a nonprofit. And before we kind of get too much into what Pidola is about, I think a lot of people would like to know, and actually let me back up a little bit for our viewers, that both of you launched Pidola, correct?
Yes, we
Okay,
did.
That's right.
With one other co-founder, Nick. There were three of us that did
yeah,
the
and
original launch.
Nick Killian, unfortunately, he couldn't join us today, but yeah, he was the third co-founder. So you guys launched Pidola. And when about did you launch it, approximately?
Our first May of 2016. We got our nonprofit status in 2017, but we established the LLC and got our EIN and all of that stuff in May of 2016.
Okay. And if just to educate kind of folks a little bit about how did you guys like meet each other or come together to launch Pidola? And you can give us the Reader's Digest version here if it's a long story, you guys.
Well, I'll start. So Michelle's kind of the linchpin between the three of us. So Michelle and I used to work together at a community solar company that's based in Longmont, up in Colorado, or Louisville, Colorado. And so her and I met initially working at this company. And then Michelle knew Nick through the graduate school, the MBA program at the University of Denver. And so Michelle knew both of us, and then she introduced Nick and I, and then the three of us came together to start Pidola.
Okay. Why did you guys, relating that, so you guys were coming together talking about this, and I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, there probably were a number of conversations that you guys had before launching this, correct?
Yeah, the Wayback Machine is that Nick and I, as a part of our MBA program at Daniels College of Business, we had to, like any MBA program, you got to put together a go-to-market strategy, a product, a service, and go through everything you've learned in the MBA program as kind of a part of a delivery at the end of the program. We originally talked about doing campgrounds. We talked about a lot of different things. But we finally landed on doing our diligence and research in National Park Service campgrounds or even state parks, where you have a lot of generators kind of disturbing the silence, a lot of those kind of things, where we wanted to have a microgrid solar facility out of the woods where it could actually have enough sun to make power, and then have it where you could kind of buy kilowatt hours. And so instead of running your generator, you'd be encouraged to have kilowatt hours and plug into the solar, and then you use that microgrid to have at the posts for each of the campground posts. We can talk about all of the pros and cons and why we decided to pivot, but we then decided to pivot to look at international work, specifically remote rural schools, places that had already been introduced to kind of the Western world, so to speak, or the developed world. It shouldn't be West or East, but the developed world. And that's when we started chatting with Lou, or I started chatting with Lou at work one day, and we realized we all had this connection to Bolivia and Latin America specifically. We all had a connection to renewable power. We all had this connection to wanting to help rural, underserved communities. Nick has 4 girls. It's just this common thread of, okay, yeah, we want to help. How do we do a product or a service that makes things better? And then how do we take this to a place where we can have the biggest impact possible?
Okay. And let me just clarify for our viewers here. So you said Daniels College of Business. You're talking about the business school at the University of Denver, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You guys are alumni of that, or you and Nick are alumni of that program, correct?
Mm-hmm. And Lou is as well. Yes.
Oh, and Lou is as well. Okay. All right. Just wanted to clarify that.
But he was in a different cohort than Nick and I. But that's
okay. Different class.
Anyway,
in different class.
Lou and I worked together at the same office, realized we had both gone to Daniels College of Business for our MBA. Nick and I were in the same cohort. So
about how long did you guys talk before you actually decided to kind of launch this thing? How long did these discussions go on for, roughly?
3 or 4 minutes. Lou and I, we talked like one time, and Lou's like, "I'm in. Let's go. I've got contacts in Bolivia."
Yeah. I think kind of the proof of concept was developed probably about a year. 6 months, 9 months, probably about a year, until we actually pulled the trigger, right? And so, but yeah, for me, Michelle brought it up. 4 minutes later, I was on board.
Wow. Okay. So, all right. So yeah, it seemed like you guys came together. All right. Now that's really interesting because a lot of people, there's a lot more discussion and collaboration and idea sharing and all this before they land and they said this, that we're going to do it. So that's really interesting to me. Quite different. That's cool. But what for you, Michelle, for you personally, what was the reason that you wanted to launch a nonprofit on your own dime, taking some risks to be sure? Why did you do it?
We started as a for-profit. Our first trip to Bolivia, the three of us really thought that we would be able to work with, and through the contacts, Lou had contacts in Bolivia, and so did I. And there's an established local Bolivian nonprofit, or it's an international nonprofit with very strong roots in Bolivia. And they really helped do our first community introductions. We met with 3 or 4 different communities on that first trip. We honestly thought that we could do a for-profit, that communities would be able to purchase kilowatt hours and internet, because our first our first meeting after we met with these communities, we realized the things that they needed that we could provide were solar energy, power, electricity, and internet, satellite internet. They also need water and all these other roads and all these other things, but those were the things we felt we could provide, and we really put an entire business plan around these communities being able to then increase their wealth by having electricity and internet, and then being able to pay, even if nominal, to pay for those 2 services. After about a year of proving, we realized that we couldn't crack that nut. It could still be cracked, but we couldn't figure out the magic for how to engage with the communities so that they would feel like they could pay for these services. It's just Latin America is set up a little differently. They're used to having electricity and water and school and things that it's not the same pay for services scenario that we're used to here in the States. So we started as a for-profit, and then we made the switch.
Okay, so that's really, so you both thought when you were going into this that you were doing a for-profit business, then for-profit startup, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yep. Okay, and that's okay. That's a very interesting twist to this, because I think a lot of people assume it's nonprofit from the get-go, or there's no changing of anything like that. When you realized, so let's dig into that a little bit more. What led you? So obviously you had a business plan. You guys have these shiny new MBAs, and your business plan probably was awesome in terms of this. Like I'm sure it got a good grade, or would have, you know what I mean, if it had been presented. So you guys went in with this business plan, and you got to the reality on the ground, which you said was in Bolivia. We'll talk about that. Especially we'll talk about Lou lived in Bolivia for a while, and we'll talk about your travel here a little bit. So you did the trip, and the shiny business plan in abstract collided with the reality of the ground and the market. Okay, so how did you guys, if you can share with our viewers, how did you guys get from, okay, this for-profit plan isn't going to work at all, but we still want to do this and come back as a nonprofit? How did you guys get there?
Do you want me to? I'll jump in, Lou, and then
how do you guys want to jump in on this one?
Well, no. I mean, I think Michelle, you and I will probably say the same thing. Where it's when we started doing these proof of concepts, right, and putting the business plan together, it was just good. But in reality, when we started talking to people down in Bolivia and these remote communities, it was too difficult to find the sources of income, right, for profit. Again, it's a socialist economy and country in Bolivia, and so for people who are like, oh, I should really have these things, these resources, right? Like they should be provided for by the government. And we're like, oh, listen, this is going to be too difficult, right? And it was like a slap in the face. Like, look, there's no income here that's really available to us. And that was really the driver, as Michelle mentioned. It was like, look, this is going to be too difficult. Let's try the for-profit route instead.
Well, you mean the nonprofit route? Yeah.
I think there's 2 things that are really key here. One, that Daniels College of Business MBA, it is planet, people, then profit, right? They do that triple bottom line thing that's probably now a cliche, but whenever we were talking about what products and services we were taking to market, there always had to be, how does this improve or affect the planet? How does this improve or affect people? How does this improve or affect profit? In that order. And what's so cool is, we tried to come up with something that was going to impact those three things. And it was almost a kind of a pat on the back to say, wow, we did something that could be really positive here. So much so that it's so impactful that it could also work as a nonprofit. So that's one thing. But do you want me to do my second, or do you want to?
Yes, please do your second. Yes.
Okay.
I've got a ton of questions here. Please go.
So then my second kind of aha, now I got sucked into my first aha, but I think my second aha was also that when starting kind of a side hustle type business. So we didn't get a business loan. We didn't come in with, 50 grand or 100 grand. We didn't come in with any startup funding. We just said we want to do this, and we just kind of self-funded it, a couple $100 out of our own pocket here and there whenever we needed to. We paid for our own trips to Bolivia. We didn't had this business, our business plan, had we taken this prospectus and gotten, let's say, $250,000 to start this, I'm not certain that we wouldn't have been able to figure it out. We said we had $250 million, and the three of us moved to Bolivia, and we became conversationally fluent in Spanish, and we moved to Toro, and we went to these villages, and we sat down with these communities day in and day out, and we figured out ways to use electricity and internet to create wealth in the community. We may have been able to do what our business plan wanted us to do, but we didn't go about it that way. We went about it with $250, not $250,000. And we still are going about it as a side gig out of, funded out of our own pocket and donors. But it is interesting for me to think about, had we gone in with money, we maybe could have achieved our business plan. And maybe in 10 years or 20 years of doing this, maybe we will eventually achieve that business plan.